It will bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, the cost of rent is rising now to record levels. So I've got a simple question for you. Are landlords exploiting people, or is it just simple supply and demand economics? You tell me. And Rishi Sunak, he has recommitted the UK to continuing our support to Ukraine. I'm asking you, is that the right thing to do? Are there any limits to this or not? You tell me. Also, speaking of Sunak, he is over in Spain, trying to encourage European cooperation when it comes to the migrant crisis. Is that the answer to all of this closer European cooperation? Will it work? What does it look like? Also tonight, I'm asking, do you think we champion the working classes enough? We seem to have initiatives everywhere for everybody, but I really do feel that the working class are left behind. You agree with me or not? We've got it all to come and more. But before we get into it, let's grab tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB newsroom is that a man who broke into Windsor Castle armed with a loaded crossbow in order to kill the late Queen has been sentenced to 9 years in jail for treason. Jaswant Singh Chahal wandered around the grounds of Windsor Castle for about 2 hours on Christmas Day 2021 while the late Queen was still in residence. The Old Bailey heard today he'd been encouraged to do so by an artificial intelligence virtual girlfriend with which he had exchanged thousands of messages. The judge said Chahal was non-psychotic and therefore culpable when he devised his plot, but had lost touch with reality and become psychotic by the time he carried it out. Sir Justice Hilliard delivered the sentencing earlier on today.
The defendant harboured homicidal thoughts which he acted upon before he became psychotic. There is a significant risk to members of the public of serious harm occasioned by the commission by the defendant of further specified offences.
Now, the coach driver in the Wirral bus crash has been described as having suffered an event at the wheel before the incident killed both him and a 15-year-old girl, according to a coroner's court today. CCTV footage from inside the cab of the coach showed the driver, David Shrimpton, slumped to the left while he was driving. 54 people were on the bus when it overturned on the M53 last Friday. Sir Keir Starmer has revealed an extra 700,000 urgent dental appointments would be introduced under Labour in plans to improve the nation's oral health. The party would also introduce supervised toothbrushing sessions in schools across England to tackle preventable tooth decay in children. People in most need of treatments, including fillings and root canal work, would be prioritised under proposals aimed at rescuing NHS dentistry, as it's called. The plans would be backed, Labour says, by £111 million a year, which they said would come from abolishing non-domiciled tax status. Sir Keir says Labour wants to target areas where people can't get a dental appointment.
Too many places across the country there's a desert where you can't get an NHS dentist, so we also have a scheme in place to ensure that we get newly qualified dentists into those areas. So that's the immediate fix, but obviously in the longer term we need to do preventative measures. So the third limb of this is toothbrushing at schools where we've got the biggest problems in our breakfast clubs, to make sure that children are brushing in the right way and therefore we prevent some of the problems.
Sir Keir Starmer. Now, the cost of renting a property has increased to the highest level on record. The average charge for a place to live, excluding London, is now almost £1,300 a month, which is the 15th consecutive quarter that record has been broken. And it's worse still in the capital, with average rents rising to more than £2,600 a month. That's double. The research by property website Rightmove also shows that demand is higher, with 25 inquiries per dwelling compared to just 8 before the pandemic. The Prime Minister says he wants European leaders to unite and target people smugglers. Rishi Sunak is in Spain for the European Political Community Summit, where he's going to be co-chairing talks with the Italian Prime Minister on the rising levels of illegal migration towards Europe. The Prime Minister also spoke to Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, saying Europe must face down the threat from Russia. Now, the Transport Secretary says cancelling the northern leg of HS2 will allow for investments that fit the needs of the country. That's after the Prime Minister unveiled a £36 million plan for a transport network called Network North to replace the northern section of the line. Former Prime Ministers Boris Johnson and David Cameron, however, both criticised the decision, saying that a once-in-a-generation opportunity had been lost. Mark Harper told GB News the facts, though, have changed.
Every penny that we save from cancelling that's £36 billion, and reinvesting every penny across the North, the Midlands and the rest of the country on important transport infrastructure that the people of this country want. So I think that's just changing what we're investing, still investing in transport, but having investments that fit the needs of the country and recognise the facts have changed about the costs of HS2.
Now, going back to events in Ukraine and Russia, at least 51 people have died after a Russian missile hit a cafe and grocery store in the northeast of Ukraine. It's reported the victims had been holding a memorial service at the time. Ukrainian officials have called it a heinous crime. It appears to be one of the biggest single civilian death tolls since the start of the war. Now, in news here at home, the Princess of Wales has joined some of England's World Cup winning wheelchair rugby league squad. She got stuck in as well at the event in Hull, where she sat in a wheelchair for herself and gave the game a go. Kate, who's patron of the Rugby Football League, is there to promote inclusivity in the sport, much to the delight of the participants involved. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thanks for that, Polly. I must confess, when the headlines are on, sometimes I'm busy organising my bits and pieces before I talk to you. But I'm sure I just looked up then and saw Kate in a wheelchair. Did I? Did I just see that? I think I did. And if I did see that, is that a little bit odd? I don't know. I don't know what the rules are around these things. Get in touch. You tell me. I am Michelle Dewberry, and I am with you until 7 o'clock tonight. The CEO of the First Property Group, Ben Habib, alongside me, and the academic and ethnographer, Lisa Mackenzie. Every time you're on, people email in and go, what's an ethnographer? So let's get this out before we start.
It's just a research method. It's just a way that I do research. So
the way that you do research, specifically?
Not me, but all ethnographers. It's about being embedded in a community. So I do community research.
Are you any the wiser? Yeah? You get in touch, you tell me what's on your mind tonight. gbviews@gbnews.com is how you get hold of me, or you can tweet me at gbnews. I want to ask you about the working class tonight. Lots of you are already getting in touch with me about that topic. It seems to have got you all talking already. Many of you are asking, what does the working class even comprise of these days? The definition, many of you are suggesting, seems to have shifted. Is it fit for purpose anymore? I don't know. I would describe it probably the working class. If you need to go to work and earn a living, then to me, you're working class. If you're a trust fund baby or whatever, then obviously you're not. That's how I would define it. And I also think, even as you move up the income levels, I still think you're working class. Do you? You can get in touch with me and tell me your thoughts on that. We'll come to that story very soon. But for now, I want to talk to you about property. Get this. The average rent in the UK now, the average rental property, should I say, has got 25 people inquiring about it. And the average rent, get this, outside of London now is £1,278 a month. In London, £2,627. I mean, goodness gracious me, that is pretty eye-watering stuff. It's led to a big conversation today, Ben Habib, and there's a real kind of dividing line among people that are commenting. One school of thought is that landlords are taking the mick now and they are exploiting people and basically profiteering. The other school of thought is that actually basic supply and demand, fair profiteering, fair capitalism. Where are you on it?
Well, I can't rule out the possibility that some landlords are taking advantage. But, you know, what we're seeing playing out more generally, and I think is the root cause of this problem, is a spike in inflation. And with that spike in inflation has obviously come a massive increase in interest rates. And landlords who were used to paying close to nothing for their property are now having to finance very expensive mortgages. The 13 years...
Only if there was on a deal that's just expired and needed redoing, or if there was on a tracker or something.
Well, all mortgages, any mortgage taken before 2022 will go up in price considerably. So if you've cut your cloth according to what interest rates were in 2021 or any of the prior 13 years before 2021, you will now be facing difficulty. Everyone's mortgage has gone up. So I think that is the fundamental...
Well, not everyone. If you fixed yourself in for, I don't know, a 5-year deal or a 10-year deal or whatever, then your mortgage hasn't increased just because the base rates have.
No, OK, that's quite rare, though. Most fixes, to the extent people do fix, are 2 or 3 years. So everyone's rate is going to go up imminently or has gone up. And so that is good. I think that's the principal biggest component of the rise in rents. The other big component, of course, is the drive towards net zero and the requirement for landlords to make their properties compliant with an EPC, with an energy performance certificate of at least C by the time we get to 2027, or they'll be prohibited from leasing it. And then the third big driver of rents has been a move in taxation against landlords. So if you're a private renter of property, you own another property, you have to pay 3% extra stamp duty. If you own it in a corporate structure, you pay a greater stamp duty.
Well, a landlord used to be able to offset the interest costs.
And you used to be able to offset your interest costs and your operating costs against the income before you pay tax.
Wear and tear and stuff like that.
And now you can't do that. So there's been a move against landlords. And by the way, successive governments have raided landlords in order to finance their positions. And so we're seeing, you know, the result of all of those, all those things coming together.
So in your mind, it's all basic, fair, above board.
Well, I'm not saying it's all above board, but I'm saying the general trend is driven by factors outside the control of would-be profiteering, rapacious landlords.
Well, obviously, I'm not going to agree with any of that at all. I can agree that this is a problem that's been happening for many, many years. I mean, 40 years since we had right to buy, since 1979. What's happened is we just don't have enough affordable, good quality housing for everybody, no matter what income you've got. I grew up, I lived on a council estate. Everybody on my council estate worked. We were all working people. And we had decent, good quality housing. What has happened from right to buy, successive governments, Labour, Tory, they've all been the same. None of them has invested in housing. And also we've had this shift from housing meaning everything but home. So what housing is now, it's people's pensions. Housing is, you know, because we've accepted low wages, they'll think, well, you know, my house prices is going up. So we always think that housing is perhaps savings or pensions.
More of an asset.
Yeah, an asset, something to give your kids, when actually a house should be a home.
Do you think it's a responsibility of the state, of the government, to provide working people with a home?
I don't think that there's a responsibility to provide, but I think that housing is a human right, because otherwise, if you have no home, you have nothing. If you have no home, then investing in education or healthcare, none of that will matter because you haven't got a home. So housing, it's like a basic need. It's like water.
Do you agree with that? Housing is a human right?
I don't know if it's a human right, but it is an absolute basic need. You need a roof over your head and you need food on your plate.
So then whose responsibility is it to provide that?
Well, ultimately, what we need is a successful economy an economy which is meritocratically based, and I think one of the subjects we're going to talk about is meritocracy.
Yep.
And I'm delighted we're talking about it, because we need a meritocratically based economic system which allows the entire economy to grow, so we can create the wealth required to create the housing for the population. I completely agree with you, Lisa, by the way, that we've had 40 years of neglect in the housing market. We just simply haven't built enough housing. But the most recent spike in costs isn't as a result of a long-term failure. That failure has been underlying and, getting worse. But the spike in costs has happened really in the last 12 months. And that, I think, is more to do with, inflation, interest rates, the drive...
I do think landlords are profiteering as well. I do think there's some profiteering. We're in a housing crisis. We're in a major housing crisis. Rishi Sunak has said nothing about this week. And there is some profiteering happening.
Yeah, there's one other issue which I must mention, is that we've had rampant immigration. And, last year we had a net 600,000 people come into the country. That's at least another 150,000 homes
and
required.
You've got a lot of... we're going to talk about immigration, particularly about the solution to it, whether or not it's more European cooperation. But anyway, you've got companies like, I think, Serco and companies like that that are now proactively going into towns, cities, whatever, putting on events, as I understand it, and actually almost marketing to landlords. Look, you can come to us, we can give you long-term contracts, we can give you fantastic rents, yada, 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 in order to put so-called asylum seekers into these properties. And a lot of people are getting quite tempted by that because the money on offer is attractive to them. The challenge is with that, obviously, it then takes out that housing stock from local people that have been living there, wanting to get on the housing ladder. Debbie says, did you know that some landlords are now asking for pet rent? No, I did not know that. She says, I shouldn't laugh, it's not funny, but I just think it's a bit ludicrous. She's telling me she looked at a property for £1,000, but no pets was allowed. But then he said he would let pets in if they paid £100 per cat per month.
OK, well, he's profiteering. He is profiteering.
What's the... I need to know the end of that story, Debbie. Did you take him up on that offer? Did you pay... I don't know how many cats you've got. Did you take him up on that and you pay your £100 extra for the cats? Very odd. I didn't think, actually, he was even allowed to do that. But anyway...
I think when it comes to landlording, we're in a bit of the Wild West area, to be honest. There are some very good private landlords out there, but there are also some cowboys as well.
Well, lots of the very good landlords are getting in touch with me. I've been inundated with lots of you guys telling me some of your sums, that what you're renting out your properties for. A lot of people are not appreciating this kind of so-called attack on landlords, pointing out to me that there's lots of decent landlords out there. Richard says we need rent controls to stop these vultures of greed. God blimey. I've got to say, by the way, landlords often get a kick in. You want to see the state of some tenants and some of the behaviour that goes on the tenant side of the argument as well. That doesn't often get discussed. But I can tell you, all tenants are not just innocent, sweet, law-abiding people that care for homes and leave them in a nice, decent state. Anyway, I'll bring back some of your comments in just a couple of minutes, but I also have a lot to get through. Tonight, I want to talk to you about working classes in this country. Are we failing them, do you think? You tell me.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. The CEO of First Property Group, Ben Habib, alongside me, as is the academic and ethnographer, Lisa Mackenzie. Very pleased to tell you I know the end of the story now. Debbie, who told us before the break that her potential new landlord wanted to charge £100 a month extra per cat to rent the property. She's got back in touch saying no, she did not progress. She's now found a landlord who does accept pets. And she says, by the way, this was all going on in Cornwall. If you are that landlord there, shame on you. It is a little bit ridiculous.
He's a bit petty, isn't he?
You see what he did there? Look at, he loves it, doesn't he? Look at his little face. You like it, don't you, Ben? I was asking earlier on. I thought I saw a glimpse of Kate Middleton or Princess, what is it, Princess Wales?
Princess of Wales.
Princess of Wales. Anyway, I thought I saw a clip of her in a wheelchair, and I wondered if that was appropriate these days. Lots of you have been getting in touch. Sam says, well, I'm in a wheelchair, and I believe our culture has been diluted by outsiders getting in wheelchairs and pretending to be us. Philip says, she was playing wheelchair rugby, Michelle. What did you think she was going to do? Pick up the ball and run away with it? That would be cheating. Michael says, it's very nice to see people experience for once what it is like to be in a wheelchair. Well, there you go, different opinions on that. There you go, look, we've got a clip. I wasn't imagining it. You know, when I was doing lots of different things, preparing for this programme, and I glanced up and I thought, I'm sure that's what I've just witnessed on my screen. There you go. Scoring, I was just about to say scoring a goal, but obviously I don't mean goal, I mean try. And very good, she seems to be at it too. It's quite vicious, that spot, whenever I've seen it. Two and a half bang into each other, don't they? Anyway, I'm going off on a massive tangent, so I'll get back on track, shall I? Because according to the UK's first professor of social mobility, children from working-class backgrounds apparently have to be middle-class clones if they want to succeed in education. Unconscious bias from teachers apparently makes working-class students feel inferior. Really? I'll start with you, because you embed yourself in communities and you study them.
Yes.
Do you think there is a bias?
I'm also working class as well.
Yes.
I'm a working class academic.
A working class academic?
Yeah, because working class people, believe it or not, can read books and write books.
Can they?
Yes.
Only picture books, though.
Yeah, you see? So is there an unconscious bias? No, there's a conscious one. The British class system is very overt, it's open, we know all about it, and people use snobbery, and they use all different sort of types of cultural snobbery to make sure that people are in their place. And
why?
Well, if you were middle class, if you were a middle class, professional, and you've got a kid, you want to do the best for that kid. What if that child is not?
But what's a middle class professional? Because as I would define working class, you've got to go work for a living.
Yeah.
So if you're a professional, i.e., you're working, aren't you then still working class?
No, I mean, I look at class, so this is something that I write about and I study. So I think about class, that it's got lots of different elements to it. One is a wealth element, of course. The other is, there's things called capital. So there's cultural capital, which is education and cultural pursuits. There's wealth. There's also social capital, which is about networks. Who are you networked into? And then there's something called symbolic capital as well.
Network capital. That's you. You must be like the king then. If you have these different segments, you're networking. You're a well-networked man.
Well, I don't network actually. I've kind of eschewed networking. I think it's the lowest form of getting on in life.
Is it?
I was sort of brought
But it's
up.
well used.
It's maybe well used, but I've been a kind of purist all my life, thinking that I've just got to do it on my own and make it on my. No, but that's the way I've been. But I think the points Lisa were making were absolutely spot on, and I'm delighted we're talking about social mobility in the working class, because if we're in a functioning democracy, the most important people are those in the country that work. And I think you're right, whether they're coming from poor backgrounds or, indeed, I'm working class. I have to work in order to get by. And those are the people, are the engines of the country. Those are the people on whom we need to focus, and we need to get people off dependency and into the working system. And we need people to fulfil their potential. We need meritocracy more than anything, and we need an environment in which meritocracy can flourish, can be encouraged and flourish. And sadly, what I think has happened over the last 10, 20, 30 years is that we've gone from a society based in the 1980s, which Lisa might have a lot to say about the 1980s, but a society undoubtedly where meritocracy was championed, aspiration was created, and we've moved to a culture of dependency and abrogation of self-responsibility into a kind of codependence as a big, large economic organism, rather than going forth and feeling emboldened to do stuff on our own in the way that I felt I needed to when I left school and university. And by the way, I did it with great enthusiasm and ambition. I love the idea of going out and conquering and going forth and making the best for myself, creating a family, etc., etc. And what we need is to inculcate that aspiration and then to give people the ability to deliver their own, to fulfil their aspirations.
But we do have, and what we've got to admit is we have deep class prejudices in this country. For example, accents. People judge you on accents. The way that I talk. Could I possibly be an academic because I've got a Nottingham accent and I speak in a rhythm which is a very working class rhythm?
But then I think, because obviously to some people I've got a strongish accent, and I get criticised every single day. All you need to do is put my name into social media and you see the bile that I get said about me literally all day.
About your accent?
A lot of it stems from my accent. A lot of it stems from people will listen to me, and then they don't even listen to what I'm saying. They listen to how I'm saying it, and then they will prejudge my intellect. And I remember when I was first, my background was IT, and I wanted to work in IT because I wanted to earn money. And I remember when I used to work in the city, as we called it, in London, and I was always the only Northern, I was the only girl, and I got judged massively because people thought I was thick for being a woman and Northern. And I thought it was fabulous, because I sat there and I thought, all the time you're thinking that I'm a bit dense, I am literally head down overtaking you. Within about 5 minutes, I earn about 3 times what they earn. I was much more senior, I was self-employed. So I never felt, oh, these people think that I'm a bit thick, so I need to sit in a corner. I used to just think, more fool you, sunshine, because you are not going to see me coming.
But we have got to just acknowledge that there is class prejudices in this country. That we are a class
isn't it,
country.
Lisa?
There is class prejudices in Britain, very deep class prejudices, but it's also about networks. Who do you know? Who can you call on?
Well, he said that's not important.
Well, it is. I mean, if you wanted to be a barrister and you need to have some work experience, if your mum and dad are both barristers, well, that helps loads, doesn't it?
True.
If you wanted to be a barrister, you come off a council estate, you don't have those connections, but also, can you afford to work for free for 6 months?
Yeah.
No, probably not.
We're never going to have an ideal, completely fluid social form of mobility. There's always going to be impediments. But I think it's terrific to focus on it. And the last point I'd just like to make is diversity, equality and inclusion, which is the promotion of ethnic minorities, religious minorities, sexual preferences, etc., over and above meritocracy, is the enemy of social mobility. DEI is the enemy of social mobility because it dumbs down meritocracy. And meritocracy has to be at the heart of everything we do.
Well, lots of you guys are getting in touch about this one. Tommy says, I flinch every time I hear that saying, working class. You're saying we're all workers. The term suggests talking down to people as if the speaker, whoever it is, thinks themselves superior. Nick says there's no such thing as working class anymore. Maybe a couple of years ago, he says, go through any council estate now, it's full of BMWs and Audis and stuff. He says, basically, working class is a thing of the past. Do you agree with that? Adrian says, working class, when I was a boy, nearly everyone voted Labour. They were the party for those working class manual physical jobs. He says that's not the case now. He doesn't feel the Labour Party supports the working man. Gillian says class is absolutely no longer relevant at all. Bernard says there is no such thing as working class. All there is now, we all work, but just some are low-paid workers. And he says that's because living standards are far more superior now than they were in the 50s. Lots of you as well asking what defines working class. Steve says the working class are just tools for the government to pay for their mistakes whilst they ruin the country. And Les says, Michelle, there were only ever two classes, us and them. You tell me. And on that network thing, I think that's a really interesting one because I'll say this, you cannot be what you cannot see. So if you don't know a profession even exists, how can you be that? So I do think there is a lot of merit actually in helping, dare I say it, working class kids or whatever, in broadening horizons to show them what is out there, because I believe you can have and do and be anything that you want, but you've got to know that it's there in order to aspire to it in the first place, haven't you? Final word to you, GBviews at gbnews.com. Coming up after the break, Rishi Sunak is basically saying that the UK is in it for the long haul. What am I talking about? Our commitment to Ukraine. Do you agree with that? You tell me.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Ben Habib alongside me, as is Lisa Mackenzie. Welcome back, everybody. That was a fascinating debate, and it's really got you talking. If you just joined us, you missed a great conversation then about class in this country, what it means, who is in which class, and whether or not there's bias against the working class. Keep your thoughts coming in on that, and I'll bring in some more of your feedback before the end of the show. But for now, I do want to move on because, of course, we had the big speech yesterday from Rishi Sunak. Among other things, one of the things he spoke out about was Ukraine. Let's have a listen.
I'm proud to say we've also led the world in providing support to Ukraine. We were the first country to send Western battle tanks to Kyiv. Now more than 10 others have followed. I say this to our allies. If we give President Zelensky the tools, the Ukrainians will finish the job.
Now, that got a massive round of applause. I'm asking you at home, do you back that? Are we in this until the very end? Give me your thoughts. But for now, I'm joined by Cormac Smith, who advised Ukraine's previous Foreign Affairs Minister. Good evening to you. Let me put that question to you. Is Rishi Sunak right there? Should the UK be in this to the end when it comes to supporting Ukraine?
Michelle, good evening, and thank you very much for having me on. Look, I listened very carefully to the Prime Minister's conference speech yesterday, and I was absolutely, delighted to hear him reiterate Britain's strong support. Britain has been possibly Ukraine's greatest supporter from the very beginning. The Prime Minister mentioned being the first to give battle tanks and being the first to give long-range artillery with the Storm Shadow earlier on this summer, but we were also the very first before the invasion even happened to provide significant amounts of lightweight defensive anti-armor weapons, which were quite possibly responsible for saving Kyiv in the early days. I'm delighted that we are in it to the end. I would like to see the narrative change slightly, and I would like to stop talking about for as long as it takes to actually defining what victory looks like and saying that we are in this to help Ukraine win as soon as possible. The Prime Minister did say that he believes if we give the Ukrainians the weapons they need, they will finish the job. If everybody was as supportive as the United Kingdom has been for the last 20 months, I think this war might already be over, and it might already be over in Ukraine's favour.
Do you think they're doing enough, these countries, people like the UK, etc., to try and engineer peace talks to bring the conflict to an end?
I personally, nor do any of my Ukrainian friends, see any point in peace talks. Peace talks are in Russia's favour at the moment. President Zelensky has set out 10 very clear preconditions for peace talks. And the first one of those is that Russia takes its soldiers off Ukrainian soil and back to 1991 borders. We know that Russia is taking a severe beating on the battlefield, and that peace talks and freezing the conflict where it would be very much in Russia's favour. Russia would make any commitment which Russia would make we know we could not trust because they have broken every single commitment they have made in international agreements relevant to Ukraine. So there is, unless Russia is willing to stop fighting and withdraw completely, there is no point for peace talks at the moment. And I think our government realizes that. There are others who are more on still pushing for peace talks, but I think the British government is very, very clear on that.
One of the former presidents of the EU Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, he has been speaking out today, saying that he thinks that Ukraine is corrupt at all levels. Countries are pouring in billions, hundreds of billions in total when you look at it all. Is Ukraine corrupt? How do we know that that money is going into the right places?
Well, the money certainly that the British government sends and the money that the American government sends, and I would presume others, is very, very carefully audited. So I am confident that we do know that the money and the armaments that we are sending to Ukraine is going to the right place. First point. Second point, Ukraine has a problem with corruption. I know. I worked at the heart of the Ukrainian government for 2 years, and one of the obsessions of the Ukrainian government was fighting corruption, and I saw very, very significant strides forward made in the time that I was there between 2016 and 2018. But I would point out further, the third point that I would make, I would point out further, every country has corruption, and we need not be too complacent or smug here in the United Kingdom or any other European country or North America. The problem is Western countries are tending to hold Ukraine to a higher standard than they do themselves. And my final point, Michelle, is that, accession to the EU is not going to happen overnight. It never was. And the Ukrainians are very, very clear that they still have work to do. Indeed, they continue fighting corruption, even in the teeth of a genocidal war being committed against their people. And I'm just looking at what their Prime Minister, Denis Shmyhal, said recently. Kyiv wants to put on the table a report that we are ready in 2 years, not immediately. At the same time, he emphasized the decision on Ukraine accession will take time for its approval. So the Ukrainians, are very, very realistic about this. So I read very, very carefully what the Jean-Claude Juncker said, and he did not say that Ukraine should never join. What he said was Ukraine is not ready for accession overnight. I think the point is that Ukraine needs to provide the evidence to the European Union that it is dealing with corruption and it is making progress. And that I have understood and seen with my own eyes, and I'm in contact with Ukrainian officials almost on a daily basis, is being done, as I said, even in the teeth of this genocidal war. And the final thing, the current head of the EU Commission, Charles, the Irishman, sorry, I've forgotten his second name, that's good of me, but he said today also, he mirrored the
Cormac Smith, really, unfortunately, your audio is starting to break up there, but that was Cormac Smith. He's advised the Ukraine's previous foreign affairs minister there. He's a lot more trusting than I am when it comes to that whole corruption conversation. It was a shame that the audio was just crackling a bit at the end. Anyway, where are you on this Ukraine situation?
OK, so the Chancellor of the Exchequer said yesterday, when he was asked to give it in order of 3 items, what is the most significant impact to the UK economy that's caused this cost of living crisis? And he went straight to Ukraine. He said Ukraine must be in the top 3. So the Ukrainian war, apart from the 4 billion that we've already spent on it and the other 2 billion they wish to make us commit to that war has already cost the British people an enormous amount. If the Chancellor is right, that it is in the top 2 or 3 reasons why we're having a cost of living crisis, it is causing the British people to suffer. So we need to define very carefully what our geopolitical aims are in Ukraine. And I would argue that we've achieved our geopolitical aims. They were to protect Western Europe, to make sure that missiles, Russian missiles, didn't end up on the Polish border. We've more than achieved that. The notion that Cormac was trying to suggest, that the Russians are taking a beating in the southeast of Russia, in the southeast of Ukraine, is wrong. Because we heard repeatedly about how the spring offensive was going to break through Russian lines. It hasn't. The Russians are there, and this war is going to go on and on and on. And billions are going to be poured into this war in order to win, whatever win means, against Russia. And as those billions are poured in, I refuse to believe that a very significant amount of that isn't being pocketed by criminals. And Ukraine wasn't just corrupt before the war broke out. It was 20 places below Turkey. It's below Uganda and a whole load of other countries that wouldn't make it to EU membership. I think we're getting Ukraine very, very wrong at the moment.
Yeah, and obviously, if any Ukrainian representatives were here, they would deny, obviously, that they are pocketing money. Lisa?
I've got to say, I do agree with most of what Ben said. I mean, finish the job. I mean, what does that even mean? You know, what are we going to do? Are we going to allow every last Ukrainian to die before the job is finished? Or are we going to sort of send in British troops before the job is finished? I think this open-ended, unconditionally supporting, unconditionally paying, I don't think the British public are actually behind that.
Hear, hear.
I can tell you there's a really mixed opinions on this one at home. Kenneth says, no, not a single penny more on a needless NATO-created war. Chris says, of course we should help Ukraine to the end. Why on earth is this question even coming up? If Ukraine falls, Russia will invade another country. That could be us. Chris says, well, where would the UK be now if all the allies stopped supporting us during the Second World War? Giving up on Ukraine would be dangerous to the security of the world. Evil must never prevail. John said, yes, we should support Ukraine, but in the form of loans, not just handing over money hand over fist. The UK only just recently ended up paying off debts for World War II. What will we ever get back from Ukraine financially? You know what? I can tell you now, opinions really are divided on that, and I'm fascinated to hear from you. GBViews at gbnews.com. Of course, there's been a summit where Ukraine was on the menu today, but also another thing on the menu was how the UK can work more closely with Europe when it comes to managing the migration crisis. Is that the answer? More European cooperation? You tell me.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Put your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbers and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. CEO of First Property Group, Ben Habib, and the academic and ethnographer, Lisa McKenzie, alongside me. Lots of really divided opinion on that Ukraine situation. There's a school of thought, yes, Michelle, whatever it takes, just keep pumping money and support and all the rest of it into Ukraine. If you're in that side of the fence, by the way, I'd be fascinated to know, do you think that people, Brits, should actually be on the ground in Ukraine? Would that be a red line to you? Is there any red line to you? Do you worry at all about how deep we're getting into this in terms of retaliations or not? The other side of the fence is people are warmongering. This is not as innocent as it all looks. You're saying that corruption is rife and you're not happy with it at all. One of you even said that you think Boris Johnson should be done for war crimes, basically, for trying to encourage and warmonger. Goodness gracious me, strong opinions on both sides. Now, the UK has reportedly struck a deal with the EU to share intelligence. This is all around the migrant crisis and how we're going to get on top of that. And it was a summit, of course, that Sunak was at today over in Spain. Is this the way forward? Is this how we're going to fix this mass migration?
Well, the first thing to say is EU intelligence is an oxymoron. Just get that out there.
We do respectful, polite debate on here, young man.
Look, if the EU had the intelligence required in order to shut down the people smugglers, they would have done it ages ago. You know, smuggling people is a very visually obvious exercise. They march in long lines, they're corralled by the people smugglers, they're shown the routes, they take the same routes every day, they're not being shut down. The EU here is part of the problem. The EU is part of the problem because it's got this ridiculous Schengen zone, which is the doing away of nation states across Europe, which is their ultimate aim, of course. They don't mind migration, the powers that be in Brussels, because it dilutes the importance of a nation state. Promoting their political ideology is much easier if people don't have a cultural and historical affinity to the regions they occupy. The EU is part of the problem. The only way this migration assault on Europe and the United Kingdom is going to stop is if we all police our borders and we enforce border control. And the problem starts with Meloni in Italy. It starts with Greece and the Western Balkans. They have to get their navies trained, Coast Guard trained, to intercept these boats.
Giorgia Meloni's on board with that, though, isn't she?
She's not. No, I'm afraid she's all rhetoric and no action. I was in Rome last weekend debating with what you might regard as far-right parties, and they were all talking about the need to go through the EU. They haven't recognised that the only mechanism to stop the assault on Lampedusa, on Italy, on Greece, on the Western Balkans is unilateral, independent, sovereign action in the sea, protecting your borders, getting on these boats with armed personnel if necessary, and requiring these boats to go back to where they came, if necessary, piloting them all the way back. That's what the Australians did in Operation Sovereign Borders, and it worked.
I think migration, or the movement of people now, it's the biggest issue that we're going to be dealing with over the next 10, 20 years. And I think we've got to work together. I think different countries have to work together. It's not about one country or another. When people move, they are moving through different countries. So therefore, we have to work together. I mean, I was watching a documentary about South American migration, and there's 7 million people walking through South America, walking through different countries to try to get to North America. This is a global happening. So therefore, I think just saying we need to man our borders, I don't think that's going to be enough.
But Lisa, we're not manning our borders at all. There's no even nod.
But isn't it true that France has put?
They're talking about it.
They're sort of protecting their border with Italy. I thought they were putting...
They're talking about... I mean, but France is part of the Schengen zone. You know, once you're part of the Schengen zone, you can't
They are
resist
trying,
them.
but what I'm saying is they all might be saying this in rhetoric, but in reality and in practice, they are starting to put borders up,
Well, let's hope they are.
France are taking an awful lot of money from the UK and don't seem to be that effective in what they're being paid to do, which is supposedly stopping those crossings in the first place. The question is, has it all gone too far? Do you think you can ever get a hold of this? That was one of Rishi's 5 priorities, wasn't it, in terms of stopping the boat crossings and all the rest of it? But you know what? It just seems like it's almost become the norm, and I'm not saying it's the right norm, by the way, but it's almost become the norm now that your hotel at the top of the street, no, you can't have your wedding, no, you can't have your work conference anymore because we've closed the entire thing, and we've bussed the migrants in, and you guys at home are going to be paying for it to the tune of £8 million a day. And then you sit there, and then I can't even get myself.
But there is profiteering. But there's profiteering happening here, isn't there?
And then you sit there, and then you've got the audacity as a government to tell us that we can't help the people in this country that are actually struggling and need some support. Honestly,
can't have tax cuts.
But there is profiteering in this refugee industry. There are billions being made. So
of course,
absolutely.
What do you guys think to it at home? John says the French have shown us how to cooperate, i.e., in reality, they're not really wanting to do it. Richard says, Michelle, when you say working closely with the EU, basically what you're saying is that means doing what the EU tell us to do, which is the very reason we had Brexit in the first place. Bernard says the EU can't be trusted, doesn't think they will do what they are promising to do. That seems to be a sentiment coming through thick and fast, that you don't have where intended. Look, time flies, doesn't it? Lisa, thank you very much for your company tonight. Ben Habib, thank you for yours as well. And you know the drill, don't you? Very much. You are appreciated. Thank you for watching and for engaging. Have a good night. Don't go anywhere. Nigel Farage up next, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office for the GB News forecast. Fine in the far south over the next 24 hours. A different story elsewhere. There will be cloud. There'll be outbreaks of rain as well. Not everywhere all the time, but some significant rain could build up in places by the weekend. Low pressure at the moment to the northwest of Scotland. A number of trailing weather fronts bringing a lot of cloud to the UK for the rest of Thursday and into Friday. Those outbreaks of rain continuing over parts of Wales into the Midlands, Northern England, Northern Ireland, southern Scotland. Initial band of rain clearing from the far north of Scotland, pushed away by a strong wind. And it's going to be a warm night everywhere with that wind and the cloud. Temperatures in many places not falling much below 15 degrees. Then we start off Friday with those cloudy conditions, the breezy conditions as well. Plenty of brightness, actually, for central and northern Scotland. A much better day compared with Thursday and certainly Saturday. But for much of Northern Ireland into southern Scotland later, as well as northern England, rain will persist through the day. It's to the south where we're going to see the warmth building, and increasingly high temperatures through the weekend are expected. But for Scotland, certainly it's going to be a wet start to the weekend. That rain really building up through Saturday and the first part of Sunday. Western parts of Scotland at risk of seeing 150 millimetres of rainfall. A very different story for the rest of the UK, and certainly across the southern half of England and Wales, we'll see temperatures into the low to mid-20s.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30am.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show, that's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't